On this week's episode, I'm going to talk to you about health insurance for the full-time traveler. How do you even get it? What kind do you need? Tune in for those answers and more. Welcome to the How to Travel Full-Time podcast. I'm your host, Heather Markell. If you're dreaming of full-time travel or moving abroad, but stuck at the emotional, financial, and logistical challenges, this podcast is for you. I'll help you trade overwhelm for information that gets you from down and stuck to up and going. You can dream about the travel lifestyle, or you can live the travel lifestyle. If you're ready to live it, then let's jump in together. Welcome back. Last week, I gave you my thoughts on getting healthcare overseas as you travel. I shared some of the fears I had before I even became a full-time traveler related to healthcare, and then how my experience traveling for over 7 years now full-time has impacted my thought process there. This week, I'm going to talk about how you get health insurance as a full-time traveler. I'm going to preface the episode by saying I am not an insurance broker, so I cannot tell you which option is best for you. Also, my perspective is as an American who has lived in America and also has lived and traveled internationally. So I'm not well-versed in domestic health insurance rules and regulations outside the US. However, I can give you some great information for you to start your research from. This episode is primarily for those of you traveling full-time without a full-time job. Obviously, if you are, your company is probably going to be paying your health insurance for you. But you should make sure that that health insurance they're paying for covers you internationally. If not, then pay attention. This episode may be helpful for you too. The first question is, do you even need health insurance when you travel full-time? The answer depends on where you're traveling, your own personal risk tolerance, and your age, among other factors. If you're traveling within the US, I'd say health insurance is a must. Most places you go will require insurance to treat you, and you don't want to find yourself in a bad situation and not having that coverage. Once you leave America, the answer is a bit more convoluted. The cost of seeing a doctor and having a procedure outside America is usually so much less expensive that you may wonder why you're bothering paying for health insurance. But this depends on age and general health as well. And also, of course, what part of the world you're in, because while costs are generally much lower than America, there are countries where certain procedures can be very expensive. Now, I have always had health insurance as I've traveled, but when I was marooned in New Zealand, the care was so inexpensive, I couldn't even meet my insurance deductible for the year. And that included getting a sonogram that would have cost me hundreds of dollars in the US and was much, much cheaper in New Zealand. If you're older or you have any health issues, having the safety net of an insurance policy may be worth the cost. Another scenario to consider when evaluating whether or not to get health insurance as a full-time traveler is traveling overseas and running out of an essential medication. You have to check with your insurance provider, and you'll need a plan that provides that global coverage. But let me tell you, I was a couple years ago traveling in France, and I forgot my asthma medication and ended up having an episode. And my insurance company was able to get me a script I could use at a local pharmacy in France in under 2 hours. I've worked with them in other countries as well, and they've either been able to provide me a locally usable prescription or direct me to a local provider for me to get seen by a doctor and get the prescription that way. In 2024, I was hospitalized overnight in Istanbul, Turkey. I met my entire year's out-of-network deductible the first day of the plan renewal. So, why might you want health insurance as a full-time traveler? Well, first, peace of mind. If you have to have an unexpected treatment, or even when you plan and it costs a lot, knowing that you'll get some money back and be able to use a decent hospital or doctor around the world could just make you feel better. Emergency prescriptions, like I just mentioned, knowing you can get an emergency prescription like the asthma medication that I had to get, and possible help figuring out where to go get a local doctor, which may be the ER, depending on the situation, is another great reason to consider getting the insurance. However, pre-existing conditions may not be covered. So you'll have to, on an individual basis, you have to figure that out. And if they're not, then you may have to absorb costs for any issues related to those conditions, which could, of course, defeat the purpose of the plan. Why might you not want health insurance as a full-time traveler? Well, it's expensive. And if you don't make it to your deductible cost, then it may make you feel like you're paying a lot of money for a policy for nothing. Healthcare outside the US is also, as I mentioned, much less expensive, and you could have a high risk tolerance or be super young and super healthy and not want to absorb this cost. Okay, but the big question, of course, is how do you even get health insurance as a full-time traveler? The answer is there are many different ways. If you're under 65, and if you're only traveling in the US, you can get health insurance during open enrollment periods through something like Obamacare, or you could join a group like freelancersunion.org where you pay for an annual membership and benefit from group insurance, which can be less expensive, and it's worth comparing the details of the coverage you'll get from Obamacare versus some of these group insurance plans. If you're over 65 and traveling in the US, you could check out AARP as one example. If, however, you plan to travel internationally, you are going to need an expat insurance plan. That's what it's called, an expat insurance plan. Not to be confused with an earlier episode where I defined the difference between a full-time traveler and an expat. Even as a full-time traveler, we are kind of put into the global umbrella of the term expat insurance plan. Now, these can get pricey. The two main ones are Cigna Global and Blue Cross Blue Shield. They come with their own deductibles, and the cost is based on your home address, and therefore it can vary widely. I use Cigna Global, and the other part of the cost equation is how much health insurance you want for visits to U.S. doctors. You can choose from getting coverage for a period of months up to getting 12 months or getting covered for the full year in the U.S. as well as internationally. The less amount of months you choose getting covered in the US, the cheaper your plan price will be. Some people look at something like Obamacare for when they're in the US and then use the expat plan for when they travel internationally. In effect, buying just the global coverage through one company and the domestic coverage through another. One further option is to explore companies like Allianz, Safety Wing, or World Nomads. You'll want to research claim processes like how do you submit them, meaning do you mail them in, do you fax them in, do you email them, upload them on a website, how long does it take a claim to get processed, and research other people's experiences with those companies. To get an expat insurance plan from the US, the way you do it is you can contact a health insurance broker for your city or state, and they can inform you of your plan options and plan costs. So that's a quick and simple overview of how to get health insurance as a full-time traveler and whether you should. It's worth weighing your options to see what's best for you. If you ever want to chat about this, feel free to set up a call with me at fulltimetravelchat.com. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'd love it if you left the show a review. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week. Thanks so much for listening to the How to Travel Full-Time podcast. If you loved it, please leave a review and let us know. Make sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes. Check out the show notes for important resources related to this episode, and come visit us at travellifestylecoach.com to learn more great information. If you're ready to get started with the lifestyle, go to moneyfortravelbootcamp.com, where you can learn all the strategies to afford this amazing lifestyle. Talk to you next week.